So welcome to everybody who is out this evening from Rutgers University. I really appreciate you coming out and spending some time this evening as we talk about preparing for a campus career fair. Specifically, we are going to be honing in on the virtual style career fair, which has certainly been all the rage of the last couple of years. But what I do want to impress upon everybody is the fact that the topics and best practices we're going to go over this evening are not only applicable in a virtual setting, they can also be utilized in an in-person setting. So for those of you who are freshmen, sophomores, juniors, and you anticipate having some future career fairs to attend, whether it's in 2022 or beyond, some of the same best practices that we'll talk about this evening, you'll be able to use in case, hopefully, we're back in person. I also want to mention that the virtual career fairs that have sprung up as a result of what we've been dealing with COVID-19 over the past 2 years have changed the way that we've done campus recruiting. Now, I'm speaking from an employer's perspective, somebody who's done talent acquisition and campus recruiting for about 15 years. We're never going to see the virtual recruiting go away now. I think that the toothpaste is out of the tube on that one. And I think that virtual recruiting and virtual career fairs and events are always now going to be part of the landscape for a variety of different reasons. Not only the simplicity of it, but also the fact that employers from a variety of different geographic locations can now engage with schools that otherwise they may not have been able to because the cost or the travel was prohibitive. It's also created more opportunities from a DEI standpoint as students with disabilities or the neurodiverse who may have not felt as comfortable in a big in-person mega fair may feel more comfortable in a virtual setting. And it's opened more doors up for them to be able to interact with employers as well. So there's a whole host of reasons why the virtual career fair is a positive. But even when we go back to in-person meetings and we get back to some semblance of normal, I think that these skills are always going to be very helpful. So I'm going to share my screen and bring up our presentation for this evening, which is aptly referred to as winning the virtual career fair. And then once again, as we're going through the presentation, if you have questions or if you want to share anything, the chat box is open. I'll stop a couple times for some Q&A, and then at the end of the presentation, we'll also have some time for some questions and some open discussion. My name is Chris Fitzpatrick. I am a human resources professional by trade. I've been in talent acquisition for 15 years now, specifically centered around campus recruiting, managing diversity and inclusion efforts and programs, overseeing internship and co-op programs, working with veteran communities, extending community partnerships, and also doing training, organizational development, and other assorted organizational management efforts. So definitely excited to be here. I've probably been to all total, let's just say between 500 and 600 career fairs in my career at a variety, dozens of different colleges, as well as professional career fairs, diversity career fairs, veterans career fairs, community fairs, and a variety of other types of events. So I've probably seen somewhere in the range of between 35 and 50,000 students or job seekers at different career fairs in that time. Obviously, these are just rough estimates, but doing this for that long, I've had my my share of meetings, and probably at this point, probably seen about 3,000 students virtually in the last 2 years. So it's something I've gotten used to. And so I welcome you also to ask any questions you have, and I'll try my best to draw upon any of my experience to help point you in the right direction and create what is really going to be a cohesive, holistic career fair strategy to help you stand out from the competition, no matter what type of fair you're going to. Again, if you want to stay in touch with me, I encourage you to do so. I would love to connect on LinkedIn, on Instagram, on Twitter, and then also you'll see a YouTube channel. You can search for me there. I will also send out the link one more time at the end of the presentation, and the recording of this presentation will be posted there later this evening. So if you have any friends or anybody else from organizations that you're in that you think would benefit from this information, you'll be able to share that with them as well, because we don't want them to miss out. Now, I want to throw a question out to everybody. And again, you can use the chat box to answer, or you can unmute and answer. There are 3 very distinct stages of a career fair, whether it's campus career fair, whether it's a professional career fair, whether it's virtual, or whether it's in person, it doesn't matter. There are 3 very distinct stages. Can anybody guess what those 3 distinct stages are? give anyone a shot to answer the question. You can type it in the chat box or you can unmute. All right, no hands up, no one's unmuting, so we're going to check to see if anybody's putting it in the chat box. Oh, go ahead, Nadia.
Maybe the interview process, the selection process, and I don't know, the job offer process.
It's a great stab at it. I really appreciate it. Now, and is it Nadia or Nadia?
Nadia.
Nadia. Okay, I was right the first time. Okay, Nadia.
Yeah, you're saying it right. Yeah.
That's excellent. That's a terrific guess. What you've actually described is more the interview and selection process itself. So after you've applied for a role and you're in place for a role, and that's actually how that would go. Career fair is a little bit of a different situation, because in most cases the career fair is not an interview. Now there may be instances, and I'm glad that you bring this up. There may be instances in which at a career fair you feel like you are interviewing, or there are interview questions being asked. But when I'm coaching my managers and my teammates about how to interact with students at a career fair, I ask them not to turn it into an interview because students may not be prepared for an interview that day. Amar, you have your hand up. Let's see what you'd like to guess at this.
Yeah, I'd say preparing before you show up, getting a resume ready, getting some conversation topics in your mind, preparing your elevator pitch. Second step would be actually finding people to have a proper conversation with, get them to remember you. And final step would be after the fair is over to connect with them on LinkedIn or some other platform and keep the conversation going, and hopefully they'll keep you in mind.
Let's give the man a prize. He absolutely nailed it. Amar, nice job. In its shortest form, the 3 stages of a career fair are before, during, and after. But you went into more detail there, and you really hit the nail on the head. And I think you did a terrific job of describing many of the stages and the phases of the career fair. So we divide them up into 3 distinct time frame categories, right? There's pre, intra, and post. So pre-career fair, before the fair actually happens. Intra-career fair is while the fair is actually occurring, and post-career fair is any time that occurs after the career fair. Now, what's noteworthy here is that even though the pie chart describes each of them as 3 equal stages, and while they may be to some extent in importance, or at least they're close, pre-career fair can be weeks or months. Post-career fair technically is interminable because there's really no end to post-career fair, but intra-career fair is usually only a few hours. Intra-career fair is by far the shortest time period, and yet it's the area of the career fair that we spend the most time focusing on, thinking about, anxious about, obsessing over. We think about, oh my gosh, I'm going to be talking to these people, we're going to be interacting. Did I say the right thing? Am I going to say the right thing? Let me go in there and try and put my best foot forward. And we think so much about the actual fair itself that sometimes we lose sight of the importance of this pre and this post career fair time frame. So I want to go over a couple of the really noteworthy facets and kind of characteristics of these 3 stages, beginning with this pre-career fair stage. Now, pre-career fair is your opportunity to truly set yourself apart from everybody else going to the career fair. I am going to guarantee you that if there are 100 students that approach a particular company at a given career fair, less than 10 of them have done proper research and have really taken the time and taken the steps necessary to separate themselves from the competition. As a matter of fact, some time ago at a prior employer, I did keep a loose track of the number of students who would show up to a career fair, not only with their resume ready, but either the objective statement in their resume or a cover letter specifically mentioning my company, the company I was recruiting for. And it was about 1 to 2%. every once in a while, I would have a student who would come up to my career fair table and hand me a resume where the objective statement said that their objective was to obtain either a full-time position or an internship at my company specifically. They'd taken the time to tailor the resume to coming to see me. Now, I didn't ask them if they had 20 more resumes in their folder for other customized company introductions, or if I just happened to be the lucky one that they were coming to see. But it really doesn't matter because they did take that step with my company. And as a result, my antenna were up and I was really fixated on what that individual had to say. In some cases, I even received cover letters addressed to me as the hiring manager, as the recruiter, saying why they wanted to be part of our company and detailing the research that they'd done. That was next level impressive and definitely a great way to stand out. Now, if you are going to be meeting with 20 or 30 companies, that might be a lot of work and a really heavy lift. So what are some of the things that you can do short of writing the customized cover letter or the specific resume? And the first step is researching the employers ahead of time. Your campus career center and your advisors, when they're putting together these career fairs, they know what companies are going to be attending. They have that list. Also with, for example, Handshake, which is the format that Rutgers is using for their upcoming career fairs, you can see the employers who are attending, which means that you can access career websites of those companies, social media for those companies, or ask your networks if anybody either is currently or has in the past worked at any of those organizations and start your research. So the information is out there if you know where to look and if you know who to ask. Now, Nadia brought up early as we were going through some of the housekeeping is the question about registering for sessions, waiting for some of the employers to create their group sessions or their one-on-one sessions. And sometimes it takes employers a little bit of time to get their teams together and to know how that's going to look. Now, that's on us, as our preparation for the career fair is often just as important as yours, is we have to be ready to capture students' signups and to get them engaged with the company as early as possible as well. But when you see a session that you're interested in or a company you're interested in, sign up, register for those sessions ahead of time, and then begin getting to know a little bit about who they're looking for at that career fair if they make that information known. Any profiles that you have that could be facing that employer, whether it's your Handshake profile, or we'll talk a little bit about LinkedIn in a moment, make sure that those are updated as much as possible, and then make sure that you've had your resume reviewed and polished either by your career center professionals or by a mentor or an advisor whom you trust. Get your questions ready. There's a good chance you're going to have at least some time to ask the employer questions during the career fair. And you want to be prepared to ask questions that go a little bit deeper than what does your company do or why are you here? Well, you can find out what the company does by doing your research, and they are there because they're trying to hire students. Those are both pretty simple. But being able to take some of that research and go a little bit more in depth and more granular with a little bit about what the strategy is of the organization, or what could an intern for your organization in this particular department be expected to work on over the course of the summer? Are there examples you have of successful interns who have gone through your program in the past, and what have they gone on to do? Does your organization use the intern program to vet future full-time talent? These are all really good questions to engage with the employer on at the career fair specifically. We're also going to talk about the SWOT analysis in a little bit, but pre-career fair is when you want to tackle that topic as well and start doing a little bit more of self-awareness and kind of an introspective look at your SWOT analysis. Again, we'll talk about that in just a moment. Prepare to answer the intro questions. So when an employer is asking you, well, tell me about yourself, which is, by the way, a question I hate. But you will hear it from time to time, and just making sure, as Amar had mentioned earlier, you have your elevator pitch ready, right? Which is that 15 to 20 second, maybe at most 30-second opening introduction where you tell the employer a brief summary of who you are, what you're looking for, and why they might be interested in talking to you more. And then check your tech. Make sure that wherever you're logging into the virtual career fair, that the Wi-Fi signal is not going to get you booted right in the middle of that really high-profile conversation with your employer of dreams. Make sure that you've had a chance to check your webcam and your speakers and your headphones, so that way you're as confident as you can be that when you go into that career fair, everything's going to work. If you're not confident in that, then start to take a look at alternatives. Find out if there's a space on campus, if there is a space either in the Career Center, or if there's an office that can be signed out, or a huddle space that can be used where you can go in and you can operate with the career fair without distraction and without having to worry about Wi-Fi signal. Are there any questions so far about pre-fair? And Devin has asked a question in the chat: where do you put the objective statement on the resume? Devin, what I can tell you with some confidence is that there is no answer, not only to where it should be, but if there should even be one. I personally like objective statements on resumes because it gives me a narrative idea of what's important to that individual, what they're looking for, and also how much time they've put into this process. I mentioned to you earlier about individuals who came to a campus career fair and handed me a resume where the objective statement specifically said their objective was to earn an opportunity to intern at the company I was recruiting for. I've also had it work the other way, where I've had one of those individuals hand me a resume where the objective statement had a different company name on it, or maybe it was loaded with typographical errors or other issues that showed a lack of attention or preparation. So there are also other employers who say objective statements are unnecessary, they're antiquated, they're passé. So I leave it up to you individually if you want to use an objective statement and if you think it helps, because as I've learned, there's not necessarily a hard right or wrong answer. I love them, other employers don't love them. If you are going to put an objective statement on the resume, I suggest putting it at the top just before you get into education and or experience, and make sure it's not too long because you only have so much space on a one-page resume. Amar, I see your hand is up as well. Do you have a question you want to either unmute and ask or type in the chat box? It's up to you.
Yeah, I do.
Great.
Regarding objective statements on a resume, would you say an objective statement is necessary if I'm including a cover letter as well, or would that just be redundant?
Very, very good question. If you read your objective statement and you see that it's almost a carbon copy of some of the topics on the cover letter, then it's completely unnecessary. If you are covering your objective in your cover letter, which in most cases, the first paragraph of a cover letter does take care of the objective, then I would take the objective out of the resume and use that space for more of your experience, your activities, your leadership, your projects, things like that. And when it comes to that resume, I am generally a big fan of sticking to the 2 R's of a resume, right? Recency and relevancy. What's the most relevant experience that you've had? What's the most recent experience that you've had? And including that. So it's a very good question. I think any opportunity on the resume documents to strive towards brevity and the idea that less is more, anytime you can do that, probably to your advantage. Very good question, Amar. Thank you very much. All right, so now let's assume that you've all done your due diligence and you've done your preparation and you've done your research, and now you're ready to get into that SWOT analysis that I mentioned, right? Now, for those of you who have taken any sort of business 101 course, you've probably come across this term before. I'm sure a lot of you are very familiar with it, but I'll throw it out there. What does SWOT analysis stand for? You can type it in the chat box, or you can throw a hand up, unmute, whatever you want to do.
I believe it was strengths, weaknesses.
Yeah, first thing.
Forgetting the other two. We went over this in marketing.
Yep. You got strengths and weaknesses right up at the top, right? There's 2 more, the O and the T. Anybody want to take a shot at this? And don't say overtime. Somebody's Googling this right now. I just know it. There we go. Nadia just typed it in the chat box. Thank you. Nadia nailed it. Opportunities and threats. And she is absolutely right. So strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And Amar mentioned that he's heard about this in the marketing class. And that is generally where you talk about this, right? Is you hear about the SWOT analysis from the perspective of the company in a marketing analysis or a management analysis, or in some cases, a financial analysis of the organizations. I am a big fan of the SWOT analysis as a personal assessment and an opportunity to strive towards self-awareness. And someday, if I do a similar talk on campus on emotional intelligence, I get very in-depth with self-awareness. But the SWOT analysis is a great tool for building self-awareness. The SWOT analysis is divided into 4 different quadrants, but 2 different halves. Strengths and weaknesses are internal. You own those, you control those to some extent. Opportunities and threats are environmental. They're going on around you, and your job is to try and either take advantage of them in the case of opportunities or manage and mitigate them in the terms of threats. But knowing what they are sets you up for success. An example, if you have a strength, if you have identified a strength, let's say in a technical area, let's say, for example, you feel very confident with Microsoft Excel, right? We'll use a common one to start with, and that you have a more advanced knowledge of data manipulation and visualization within Microsoft Excel. That is a great strength to be aware of in your SWOT analysis, because you can go into a conversation at a career fair and in your elevator pitch or in your discussions, talk about projects where you utilize that strength to meet an objective or to exceed a goal, something along those lines that might pique the interest of an employer. I also highly recommend, if an employer you're meeting with has posted a lot of jobs on Handshake, or if you go to their careers website and you see their internship postings and some roles you're interested in, take a look at those job descriptions and see what sorts of skills they highlight as being important, and compare that to your SWOT analysis. And if you notice that a lot of your strengths are appearing on their requirements, that might just be a really good match for you. And I encourage you to highlight those in the conversation. With weaknesses, your job is not to ignore them or try to avoid them. Your job is to understand them, own them, and be prepared to talk about how you're addressing them. Now, you may not have time to get this in depth in a 10-minute one-on-one career fair session, but this is also helpful to keep in the back of your mind for interviews and for future discussions with an employer if you've made a good impression on them in the career fair. Okay, so that's a little bit about the SWOT analysis. Again, that's a much larger topic, but I wanted to at least put it on your radar as a great best practice. Now, you've done everything pre-fair and you've gotten to the big day, and now here you are, you've logged in, you checked your tech, everything's working, your webcam's on, your headphones are working, and you're face-to-face with that employer. Now you're at intra-career fair. So what are some of the things that you're going to be mindful of and that you're going to be doing during the career fair itself? There we go. Okay, so one of the things I encourage everybody to do during the career fair itself, because I think we get so wrapped up in what we're going to say that we're not prepared for what we're going to hear. We're not prepared to actively listen to other people, to employers, to career fair representatives, because we're so anxious. It's not a place of egotism. It's anxiety over, I want to say the right things. I want to go in there. I want to nail it. I want to tell them all the great things about me and get them so excited that they offer me a job on the spot and I walk away really excited. It's just as important to be prepared to actively listen to the representative or to the employer as it is for you to talk about yourself, because they may drop hints or clues that help you in the interview process. So be prepared to go in there not only to give information, but to receive it as well. Take notes as necessary. Don't spend the entire 10 minutes trying to catch up on what the employer representative said. Remember, it's much more effective or much more valuable if you're having an interaction with them, if you're networking and having a conversation, not just taking down dictation. So make notes of really important thoughts, but try not to get so in the weeds with your notes that it's causing you not to be able to have an actual interaction with the employer. They'll appreciate it much more if you're having a discussion with them, and you'll be much more memorable to them. Share your resume when asked. A lot of times the employers have access either to resumes or profiles ahead of time. They may ask for your resume, or they may do something similar to what I do, where instead of asking for the resume right then and there, we'll provide a link for you to sign in, and we'll follow up with you and get a resume at a later date, or we'll ask you to screen share the resume during the fair. Right? There's a variety of different options. So just make sure you're ready with that resume and you have it right on hand and that it's the correct one. If you are one of those job seekers, one of those candidates who keeps multiple different types of resumes, because you can have more than one. Maybe you have resumes for specific companies, or maybe you have resumes that are tailored a little bit differently depending on a particular area that you want to get into, right? A particular vocation or a particular type of a job path. Maybe you have one that is very human resources specific, but then you have another one for marketing opportunities if you're a double major. Just make sure you keep them straight and you don't accidentally give the wrong employer the wrong resume. That happens a lot. If they do offer you the chance to register with them, I highly advise you to take them up on that, because that is a great opportunity, again, to receive follow-up and to make sure that you're still on their radar afterwards. If you have time to ask questions, have a bunch of questions ready, even if you only get to 1 or 2 of them, and then save the rest for the interview or for a follow-up email. Participate at the right times when you get asked a question. Generally speaking, in a career fair setting, you should be doing as much or more of the talking than the employer should. But it really depends on the tenor that the discussion takes, right? They may be presenting a lot of information to you and they want to tell you a lot about their company in hopes that you'll follow up with them, or they may be more interested in hearing more about you to identify whom they want to follow up with, right? So try your best, and sometimes this takes time, this takes some at-bats, but try to read the room and to get a sense for what direction that employer is taking the conversation, and then respond with flexibility as you can. And then when you're asked a question at the end of the day, answer honestly. The worst thing that you can do, especially with a difficult question, is lie about it. You want to be very honest and transparent about what your goals are, what your experiences are, what your strengths are, because what you don't want to do is end up going down the road of interviewing for a job that you're going to hate anyway, or that's not the right fit for you, or that you're unqualified for. So be honest with yourself first, so that way it's easier to be honest with the employer. Answer the questions honestly. That works both ways, right? When I say answer questions honestly, during a career fair interaction, the employer may be asking you about something that you have done in a particular area, skill set, project, or topic. And you might be tempted to talk about what your team did or what a group did during a project instead of talking about yourself. Maybe because you don't want to come off as cocky, or you don't want to be arrogant, or you don't want to just talk about yourself. But I'll remind you, in a career fair conversation, in an interview, the employer is not interviewing your team. They're interviewing you as an individual. So if you struggle to talk about yourself and to be able to kind of brag about yourself a little bit, it would be really helpful to practice getting past that a little bit, because you're going to need to brag about yourself a little bit to convince that employer that you're the right person for the job. Now you've gotten to the end of the career fair. You feel like you made a good impression. You've connected with your employers of choice. You went to some group sessions. You went to some one-on-one sessions. Your resume was ready. Your elevator pitch was sound. You feel good coming out of it. Now the career fair is over. That means the work's done, right? Now we have post-career fair time frame. And this is your time for follow-up. And again, really making yourself stand out from the rest of the crowd. Now, this can include the proper use of LinkedIn. And I want to use the hand raise function here under reactions. Please do me a favor and raise your hand if you can confidently say your LinkedIn profile is 100% complete. I'll give everybody some time. 100% complete. It's the little raise hand button. Yep. Just go to reactions and nobody? Okay. How many of you have LinkedIn, but you could probably stand to do more to your profile? Raise your hand if you have LinkedIn, but oh, now, okay, so the buttons are working. A lot of hands just went up. Okay, so if you have LinkedIn, but you feel like it is incomplete, or that there is information that could be added, maybe a professional headshot, maybe some experience or activities, maybe some endorsements, anything like that, this is a great opportunity. The next couple weeks is a terrific time to really take some time out, go to your LinkedIn, assess it for its strengths and its opportunities, and get that as close to 100% as possible. Because then if you meet an employer that you make an impression on, they may reach out and try to connect on LinkedIn, or much like me, they may invite you to connect with them on their LinkedIn. And you don't have to. Bear in mind, that is not a requirement. But if you do, you want to make sure you're putting your best foot forward and that you're making the best impression possible of yourself, right? Sending thank you notes, I think, is effective. I do think that the era of the handwritten note is pretty much over, especially with the advent of the virtual career fair. I don't think a handwritten note is necessary. Many of us who are doing these virtual career fairs are also either working remote or hybrid right now. So we may not be seeing that thank you note in a timely fashion. But a thank you email a day to two after the career fair is an effective way to follow up and to show continued interest in both the individual as well as the company. So just a very brief thank you note, and maybe highlighting one or two of your favorite things that you learned in that interaction or in your research that reaffirm why you're interested in that company. That may be very helpful to you as well. So you follow up appropriately. Follow up appropriately means you're not hounding them every 2 to 3 days saying, hey, did you get my application? Did you get my application? When am I going to hear back? You want to make sure that it is appropriate. You want to come off as being confident and believing you're the best person for the job without creating a situation where you're bogging them down with trying to catch up on your emails. Just because it's not because we don't care. It's because we have hundreds of students who may be asking us these questions. I'm going to be filling probably about 100 internships for 2022, and I will get thousands of applicants and hundreds of emails. So just staying ahead of it can be tricky. So follow up appropriately and just make sure when you are following up, you are affirming your interest in the company and why you feel you're the best person for the role. If there's an application for a job online, for example, complete the application. And remember, when you fill out an application, it is a part of the process that is a legal document. So be honest, be truthful, be forthright, be transparent. When you're filling out that document, don't do it haphazardly. Don't just do it when you have 5 spare minutes before dinner. Take the time to put, again, your best foot forward in that application, just like you did on the resume, just like you did with the follow-up letter. If you then go into the application and the application is done wrong or it's a complete disaster, that might end your process right there. Interview like a pro means go in, again, convinced that you believe you're the best person for that job, and interview in a way that highlights your strengths, addresses any weaknesses, takes advantage of your opportunities, manages your threats, and shows that employer that you bring something to the table, some value, some culture add that will make them want to follow up with you. If you don't get the job, if you don't hear back, if you have a conversation with an employer and you realize that is not the company for you, that's okay. I encourage you to please don't burn bridges, don't close doors. You never know when that employer might resurface in the future or when you might find an opportunity at that employer that might be a better fit for you, and you want to make sure that you have a positive relationship. If an employer offers you an opportunity to interview for a role that you know you are not interested in, there is an appropriate way to say, thank you so much. It means so much to me that you see the skill sets that I bring to the table and you feel that they would be of value to your organization. I would love to keep the door open for the future. I just don't think this opportunity is the best fit for me, but I would love to be able to hear more about future opportunities as they come up. We can connect on LinkedIn. Please email me if you have any questions. Thank you very much. Something to that effect. That leaves the door open for the future, shows gratitude for the opportunity, but also says that is not a job I'm interested in. That is okay. All right? Don't close doors. Don't burn bridges. All right, so that is an in-depth description of the 3 time frames of either a virtual or an in-person career fair. You'll notice that most of these, with very few exceptions, like check your tech doesn't really apply to an in-person career fair unless you're printing out resumes at the last minute. But a lot of these are applicable whether it's an in-person or a virtual event. And that's why I mentioned earlier, you can use a lot of these best practices in either way. Before I go to the next slide, what I want to do is see if there are any questions. Okay, you can raise your hand, you can unmute, you can type a question in the chat box. You all have been doing a great job with this so far, but I do want to pause and see if there's any questions. Is it Aiden?
Yeah, it's Aiden.
Aiden, please, yeah, go right ahead.
Okay, so with my resume, you know, I don't exactly have too much experience or any experience really at all in the industry that I would be going into potentially to land an internship. And, you know, I'm worried that I do have work experience, but it's just I don't know if it would be enough. I'm in school currently. Should I mention? Well, that's my one question. That's another question. Should I mention that I'm like in the middle of a program that would fit? Like, should that be listed on my resume? Like, because I have my bachelor's, but I'm working for my master's in HRM. So should I list that in my resume?
Yeah, I definitely think so. You want to let the employer know where you are in your educational journey.
Okay.
And let me provide you an example. And William, I see your question. I'm going to get to that in just a moment about where this will be posted. But let's talk a little bit about Aiden's question, because I think he brings up a really good topic. I think letting us know where you are in your educational journey is important, because some of our internships or co-ops, in fact, in many cases, they will require you to be a student of some sort. And for example, in the cases of my roles, they're posted as undergraduate opportunities. But if I have a good graduate student who's interested in a summer internship, 100% I want to talk to that individual, because that shows a tremendous commitment to that craft, right, into that area of study, area of focus. So I think that that's fine. I think you can list that you completed your bachelor's degree in, let's say it was May of 2022, May of 2021, for example, and then under that put master's in human resource management, anticipated completion May of 2023, just using that example, because that just lets me know, okay, this is a student who's already completed a bachelor's degree, already shown what it takes to get there. But then also is going after a higher degree in that area. That shows a tremendous amount of dedication to the craft. Regarding the other question about, I don't have a ton of experience, it's not something that I can put a lot in there about. That's where the self-awareness and that SWOT analysis can be very helpful.
Okay.
Is think about your ideal role. Think about the types of roles you're really interested in, or what direction you want to go in, and then think back to maybe your classroom projects, right? Was there a group project or a classroom project that you think speaks to that particular area that you could add a section on your resume to discuss? Was there any sort of area of prior job experiences that were somewhat related to that career path that you can add there, right? And then maybe spend a little bit more time focusing on skills. In your case, maybe going a little bit into some of the courses that you've taken without listing the entire transcript, but focusing there and just kind of taking some of the focus off maybe some of the older jobs or the less relevant jobs, and bringing into focus a little bit more about what you've learned about that particular area. And then this is also why internships are so critical and so valuable, because this is I think this summer will be a great opportunity for you to land something to help you get not just a better grasp of human resources, but what you like about it, what you love about it, what gets you excited, what made you decide you wanted to pursue this master's to begin with, right? What was the motivating factor was, and then being able to apply it in a real world situation. So, we'll know, right? Employers, most of us, especially if we're posting internships, we're going to know that you're not overflowing with a ton of experience. And it doesn't mean that you're going to be going up against 200 people who are, right? You're going to be going up against other college students who are probably asking similar questions. So be transparent, be honest, and let the fact that you're excited and you're passionate for the topic really come out.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, great question. There was a question in the chat about posting the presentation. So yes, this will be on YouTube. I will be posting this on my YouTube later on this evening. I put it in the chat as well. So you'll notice a bunch of different ways to stay in touch with me, but the YouTube channel is there as well. So that way you can share it with anybody in your network, or you can come back and watch it again if there was something you missed. All right, so some really good questions. Aiden, that was the only question you had, right?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. There we go. All right, so I want to recap some of the information that we've gone through here. Oh, and Carlos, thank you so much for putting in the chat about the one-on-one resume reviews. And that's so timely and so topical, because a lot of questions I'm hearing tonight have to do with resumes and kind of the uncertainty about how the resume should look. And so a plug for your campus career center and your advisors. They do this all the time, right? They know how to look at this. They know how to provide that expertise. We also, as employers, we talk to your career center professionals and we tell them what we're seeing, what's working, what's not working, in areas of focus. And they take that feedback and they distill that down in the advice that they give you. So please take advantage of the people in those offices, because remember, you pay for those services whether you use them or not. All right, so take advantage of them. You may as well. All right. So a couple things just to recap and just to kind of go through as far as best practices go, since the bulk of the conversation is centered around the pre, intra, and post career fair. Please don't miss out on the opportunity to do your preparation and understand that most of the career fairs are won and lost in that first stage. And this also goes for interviews too. This is not just for career fairs, but the preparation that you do generally will come out unless you are incredibly adept at improv and ad-libbing, which is entirely possible, but even still, preparation will benefit you. In meeting people at career fairs and meeting people in interviews, I will generally know within the first 2 to 5 minutes what level of preparation someone's done. In an interview, one of the first questions I ask is, tell me a little bit about what you've learned about the company and what led you to decide to apply. And if the follow-up answer is, I don't know, I just wanted to learn more about what it is that you all do, then, there's a little bit of a question about how much preparation was done or how much time was spent. Now, with career fairs, in some cases, you may genuinely be meeting with that employer because you want to know what the heck it is that they do. But you can go into that conversation and say, I noticed on your website, let's use my current company, Crestron Electronics, as an example, right? We are in the audiovisual industry, in unified communications and integrated systems. And you might come to a one-on-one conversation with one of our hiring managers and say, I'm interested in learning more about what unified communications and integrated systems mean, because you mentioned that on your website. How does that how does that come to life? How does your company do that? And let us talk about that. And you are demonstrating to us that you've done that prep work and that you've learned a little bit about what we do, even though you may not completely understand it. Heck, I've been there for over 3 years. I don't completely understand it, but it shows that you've done some research and it shows that level of interest. So remember, a lot of career fairs are won and lost in that pre-interview stage. And then that goes back to your LinkedIn piece. Here's an example of my LinkedIn, a little bit of a look of what a complete LinkedIn profile might look like, including sort of a LinkedIn objective statement, connections, alma mater or current school, company, experience, education, any certifications that you have, also any club affiliations. So if you're looking at human resources jobs and you want to include affiliations with your campus SHRM chapter or any other community SHRM chapters or a Toastmasters chapter or anything like that, or even your volunteer work, that can be very valuable on your LinkedIn profile as well. Okay. A little note about traditional career fairs versus the handshake career fairs or the virtual career fairs. It's important to note that at a traditional fair, there's a large space that's taken up and there are a lot of unintentional and intentional conversations, right? At a traditional career fair, you might have mapped out who your top 5 or 6 companies are that you have to talk to and that you have those tailored resumes. But while you're there, there's 10 or 15 other companies that you didn't realize would be there that you just want to drop in and say hi and learn more about. That's an unintentional conversation. And there's a lot of value in those with a traditional career fair. This is one of the few places where a virtual career fair is at a tremendous disadvantage versus a traditional fair. And it is almost impossible to make it up. Is you really don't have those unintentional, accidental conversations. Let me visit this booth and see what they're about. Wow, I had no idea that they did all that. That was a really neat presentation. Now I'm interested. You really don't get that during a virtual fair because so much of what you do has to be scheduled and has to be intentional. So what that means is you're probably not going to accidentally fall into a lot of conversations, and that makes your research even more important because every conversation is intentional and is planned and is scheduled. So best practice number 3 is be aware of your personal brand. I bring a lot of marketing topics up, even when talking about career fair strategy here. Now, maybe that's because I was a marketing major in an undergrad as well, or maybe that's just because what you're doing in a career fair is just marketing yourself. I mean, that's essentially what you're doing. You are a product. You are a brand. So be aware of what your brand is when you walk into that career fair setting. And that is good, bad, or indifferent. You need to understand you're going to make an impression upon other people. So be aware of what your resume says about you, of what your background or your surroundings says about you. If you don't like the background that you're going to the virtual career fair in, be prepared to blur it or have a filter or to download something that can be placed behind you. That is also not distracting. A lot of people use these distracting backgrounds as conversation starters for their meetings, and that's great. But if you have 10 minutes for a one-on-one conversation at a virtual career fair, and that's how long it lasts, it'll last 10 minutes. That sounds like a long time. It is over in the blink of an eye. It feels like 3. In every case, you will be shocked how quickly that 10 minutes will go by. As a matter of fact, in the time that I've been presenting this PowerPoint to all of you, you could have had 5 interviews, right? Time goes by quicker than you think if you're engaged in a conversation. The other thing I want to mention to you is that good impressions can take a lot of forms, right? Great research, preparation, good resume, confidence, good background, attire, hygiene, everything like that. But bad impressions can take a lot of forms as well. And one of the areas where the worst impression is made is in a no-show. If you schedule time with an employer, here's something you need to understand. If we're at an in-person career fair and you decide not to visit my table, that's fine. No harm done. Plenty of other people who are coming up and talking to me, and we just missed out on meeting each other. Maybe we'll follow up another time. However, at a virtual career fair, if you have signed up for a 10-minute time slot with me, and then you do not make it, either because anything other than a legitimate emergency, right? Something happens, you're sick, car breaks down, your Wi-Fi dies on you, whatever it is, sometimes you can't help that. But if you just realize, you know what, gosh, that's not the company for me, or hey, I got an offer last night, so I don't need to worry about this quite so much, and you just straight up no-show that career fair, now you've done a lot of things. First of all, you may have burned that bridge with that particular employer. Number 2 is another student, a classmate of yours who really wanted and maybe really needed that opportunity. Maybe they didn't get a chance to meet with that employer because you took a time slot you didn't use. And number 3, no-show rate reflects upon your school. So it's not just your personal brand that you're managing and that you're taking with you into this career fair, it's your universities, it's Rutgers, right? You may as well be wearing the Scarlet Knight emblazoned across your chest because you are an extension of that campus's brand. So be aware, and if you make a commitment to meet with an employer, follow up on it and don't burn your bridges and don't squander your classmates' opportunity. Go there and keep those commitments. All right, best practice number 4, set and remember your goals and be realistic with your goals. You're probably not going to walk into the career fair and walk out with a job offer. So if you think that success is the end of the career fair, you have a job offer in hand from a company, then you're going to be prepared to probably be let down. All right. Again, I instruct my hiring managers, don't promise any employment, don't make any job offers. It's not even an interview because somebody at a career fair hasn't necessarily applied to a job. We don't know if they qualify. We don't know if they meet all the minimum criteria, right? So what are your goals for a career fair? Build your network, identify companies you're interested in, to promote your personal brand, to get your resume in the hands of decision makers, and to earn follow-up conversations, to create a situation where you're memorable to that individual, whether it's a recruiter, a hiring manager, or a representative who's going to come back to me and say, hey, I met Aiden, I met Amar, I met Connor, I met Devin, I met these people, and they really made a good impression on me. These are the first people I'd like you to follow up with. Now you are in the good pile, and you will get the priority of follow-up. That is your goal, is to make the best impression possible, so that way you can earn the interview that earns the job. Okay? I very frequently say this about resumes also. Resumes are important, but you very rarely get a job just on the strength of the resume alone. The resume gets you the interview, the career fair gets you the interview gets you the job. Number 5, I think there's this mystique and this almost intimidation factor around career fair representatives, company representatives, because you feel like you have so much riding on it in that intra-career fair moment. But please remember and keep in the back of your mind that every single person who's there speaking to you has at one time been in your shoes. We aren't, and we shouldn't be, scary people. You should feel comfortable having a conversation with us, getting your questions answered, feeling comfortable putting the best version, your authentic self out there, and feeling respected and appreciated. And honestly, if you happen to meet the 1 in a million employer who does not appreciate your authenticity, your individuality, or doesn't feel like you can put your best foot forward, then that's probably not a place you want to work anyway. There's an excellent chance also that some of the career fair representatives may be alumni of your school, right? I always make it a point to invite alumni of a particular college or university to attend that career fair. First of all, because they love it, because it makes them feel like they're back in college, and who doesn't love that? But also because it's an opportunity for them to give back, and they have a kinship, they have a connection with you all as students, as candidates, as job seekers that I couldn't have unless I went to that school as well. So there's a lot of value in that. And if you happen to meet somebody who is an alum of your school, instant connection, and use that to help build your network. And best practice number 6, this is for post-career fair. When it is all over, debrief with yourself. Really sit down and intentionally think about what just happened. What went well? What went wrong? What would I do differently? How am I going to follow up? And map out your strategy, because you don't want to make the mistake that so many make, is thinking that just because the career fair is over means that the job is done. No, it is just beginning. Now you really got to go in there and follow up and knock it out of the park. So I'm going to stop the share now and bring us all back into this main room here. And I want to thank everybody for the questions during that conversation topic. We covered a lot of ground tonight. All right, we've been talking for almost an hour about career fairs and some discussion about resumes. I want to open up some Q&A as well, since we're almost at the end of our hour. William, I see your hand is up, please.
Can you hear me, Chris?
I can. You're coming in loud and clear.
Okay, so my question is in regard to in regard to applying for the job after you talk to someone at a career fair. So you said that it really helps to, send a follow-up email and like drop the person's name and say, oh, I talked to this person, it went really well, and like provided you gave a good impression, that should send you to the top of the pile. But let's say that you're applying for the job, like on like the link they gave you to the career site, you found the job. How do you name drop them? Like, can you do it in your cover letter, or like, is there any way to like sort of tell them that you met somebody at the career fair, so you're not just like in the same boat as everyone who just is applying off the internet?
Yeah, it's a great question. Right now, you've been sent the link to the careers website, and you're applying for the job, and you did all this prep work for the career fair, and you went in and you made a great impression, and you don't want to lose that momentum. How do I put that forward, right? So you mentioned the cover letter. I think that's absolutely appropriate. Right. So in that intro of the cover letter, saying something to the effect of, my interest in your company was renewed, was increased, was fueled even more by my experience in meeting X at the Rutgers Career Fair. They told me about this project and what the company is working on this, and how it values this particular value set, and that speaks to me, that spoke to me. And then in the body, go through how you hit on those major points. I can bring this to the table, and I understand you're looking for that. And this individual at the career fair told me that this is important to you, and that is me, and here's an example of how. So yes, I think you can use that in your cover letter. The other thing is that when you're filling out the application, most applications will have a question in them that asks, how did you learn about this opportunity? And you can choose Campus Career Fair, right? It may ask for the school, it may just say Campus Career Fair, but then there also might be a text box, right? So my applicant tracking system does this, where you can put in University Career Fair, and then you can put the specific school, but you can also type the name of the representative you met with.
Okay.
Right? So if I see that on an application, right? If I see, okay, so William went to the Rutgers Career Fair and met with Carlos, who was our representative, and now they have an application in, I'm going to go over to Teams or Zoom or text or email, and I'm going to ping Carlos and say, Carlos, do you remember this person? Because they put your name on the application. You must have made an impact on them. What do you remember about them? Oh, yeah, great questions, professional, good resume, was definitely at the top of my list. All right, great. I'll follow up with a conversation. The other piece of advice I'll just give you here, William, is also don't force it, though. If you see the opportunity, again, the cover letter, very appropriate. The application, very appropriate. But you don't need to force it, because you want the strength of your application, your qualifications to get you the call, right? To get you that. But then in an interview, to also bring up the fact that you met Carlos at the Rutgers Career Fair, you met Chris at the Rutgers Career Fair, and they made an impression on you, and here's why, and that's why you're there today. I think that's another appropriate time to bring it up.
Okay, cool.
Great
Thank
question. Yeah, thank you. Absolutely. So we still have a little bit of time for any questions. If anybody wants to throw a hand up or type it in the chat box, feel free. But again, if you want to follow up with me, I've provided everybody with a bunch of options on how you can do so, as well as the link to the YouTube channel where I'll be posting the video. Amar has a question. Go ahead, Amar.
Is it okay if the question's not too related to career fair?
Can you give me an example?
I'm looking at your LinkedIn, and I see that you're hiring for a software engineering position, and I was wondering if I could ask for some resume advice
So
regarding.
that's the question that you would want to ask in the career fair setting?
Not necessarily, but
Okay, so I want
since
to
we
make
have
sure
the opportunity now and there aren't many questions happening now, I thought
yeah, I understand. So I
might
would
as well.
say that as far as individual resume, let's follow up on that offline. I'd be happy to provide, give you a look at it for sure.
Oh, I don't mean
I would-
like show you my resume. I'm just my background is I suppose it's a little similar to the person earlier who was talking about their resume doesn't have too much relevant job experience, but they're trying to
Yep.
break into the field.
Yep.
I've
And
been
a lot of people are going to be in that boat. Absolutely. Yep, absolutely. So yeah, I'd be happy to to kind of take a look at that. And of course, I know that you've got you have a lot of tremendous resources there at school. If the question is, asking an employer at a career fair to take a look at the resume and provide advice, I would say that wouldn't be the time to do that.
yeah, definitely not.
Yeah, okay. I just want to make sure I'm clear on the question. But yeah, no, I'm happy to provide any kind of advice that I can whenever I can. But again, you have that campus career fair there for a very good reason. These are professionals who are trained and who study up on this all the time. I can give a perspective, but they hear more from different types of employers where I can only speak from my own perspective. So
Yeah, just seeing that you have 15 years of HR experience, so
yep.
you seem like you've definitely seen quite a few things.
Not a bad resource to have. Totally understand. This is why I'm happy to network. And this is why, let me actually touch on that for a moment, Omar. This is why I applaud all of you for coming out to an event like this, right? I mean, listen, it's 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock at night on a Tuesday. And you've probably had classes today and you've probably had tests and done all this stuff. And here you are still grinding away and coming out to an event like this to get some information, but also to build your own professional network. And think about how many of your classmates aren't taking advantage of this. I applaud each and every one of you for taking that extra step. That really speaks to your work ethic, your drive, your dedication to want to do this right. I think we're going to go last question, William, and then I'm going to stop the recording, and then we'll chat for a couple minutes after. So, William, what do you have for us?
Okay, so this is relatively yes or no type of question. So I'm taking a class called Career Management in it we were learning today, a lot about resumes and stuff. I'm a senior studying engineering, so like I've had a resume for like a while, but what I learned today is sometimes you shouldn't put a summary on your resume for the job. And since I'm looking for tech jobs, I was thinking to myself, okay, if like there's ever a job that doesn't need a summary, it's probably like a tech job. So what's your opinion on that? Yes or no? Like type of summary.
I am the king at not answering yes or no questions with yes or no. It depends. It really does depend. I would say that with tech jobs, it's probably not as important to have the summary as it is to be able to highlight the technical skills that you used, especially if those technical skills relate directly to the company that you're submitting the resume to, right? And any projects that you worked on, successes that you had, things along those lines. So I think you do want to highlight things like that in the resume, not in narrative form, but where you may not have a summary, you do want to highlight what the technical skill sets. And you mentioned engineering, right? And I I'd say 60% of my of my internship program is engineering and computer science. So I see this all the time. If you're applying for a role, an internship, or a company that does a lot with a very specific programming language, and you have a prior experience or a classroom experience that use that programming language, you want to include that. If you're more on the mechanical side and there was some equipment that you utilized in a manufacturing lab or in a maker space, you want to be able to drive that home. That is really valuable and really relevant from our perspective.
Okay. Yeah. What I was thinking is my summary currently, it doesn't really say too much other than like this is the industry that I'm interested in. I've experience in it. I've led a team of like X amount of people, and it's like 3 lines because I don't have that much space. But I'm thinking about ditching it and putting in like I have a really good project I could add to my experience. If I make the space, I could put this project in there instead. So instead of kind of like instead of like a summary that is a little bit like it's not fluff, like I'm not putting it on there for no reason,
Right.
but it's just like
more vague.
Yeah, it's more vague, exactly.
Absolutely. So here's my advice. If you're choosing between the more general summary that introduces you and a recent relevant project that could speak specifically to the job that you're applying for, always go for that project. If it's a difference between those two things, and you could lose the objective to put on a project that from what the way you described that to me, the tone of your voice, it seems like something you're pretty proud of, I would include that.
Okay, cool. I think I'll do that.
Great
Thank
question.
you.
Yeah, no problem. Okay, so I'm going to stop recording now.